Today's daf is Shabbat daf Mem Aleph. Today's daf is dedicated for happy birthday wishes to Hannah Rivka Bracha from her mother, Malka Abraham. Okay, we're going to start at the very top. I'm Rabbi Zera. Start with a little bit uncomfortable material. Warning, right? And those warnings on those Facebook posts, you know. So anyway, I want to remind you where we finished yesterday because that links into where we're starting today. We finished with this story of Rabbi Zera, who said that I saw Rabbi Avahu, he was shot ba'ambati, right? He was kind of in this type of bathtub, mini pool, something like that. And I don't know if he picked up his legs or not, meaning was he swimming or not? So you see this story where Rabbi Zera sees Rabbi Avahu doing something, and then it becomes, well, what was he doing? And can I learn from this act something about whether one can swim in something like this on Shabbat or not? So then we start with Amar Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera now sees another story with Rabbi Avahu, and we're going to have a third story where it's with Rabbi Yehuda. But the first two are the same. Ana chazite Rabbi Avahu shiniach yadav kineged panav shel mata. Okay, so now he sees Rabbi Avahu, and he's rinsing himself off in the river. And he says, and I don't know, I saw him, he put his hands to cover his private area. And I don't know if he touched himself there or not. Okay, a little uncomfortable material. He says, I don't know, was he touching himself or not? So what he was obviously was trying to see, right? Again, this you see very common is that the rabbis looked at other rabbis in order to learn behavior, right? Is this allowed? Is this not allowed? So obviously he was covering himself in order for tzniut purposes, right? He was going down to the river naked to bathe, and he didn't want people to see his private parts, so he kind of held his hands there. The question is, was he touching himself or not? So the Gemara immediately says, Pshita de lo naga. Obviously he wasn't touching himself. To Tanya, as it says in the following Braita, Rabbi Eliezer Homer, and this is quoted, those who learn Nida will remember this, Kol ha'ochez ba'ama u'mashtin ki'ilu mevi mabul la'olam. Okay, anyone who touches his private parts while he's urinating is like he brings the flood back to the world. Okay, what does that mean? What's the connection to the flood? So Rashi says, right, by touching himself, it causes him to have impure thoughts, and that will cause what we call hotza'at shechvat zera lebatala, where he has a seminal emission for no reason, and right, which means not in the process of having sexual relations. And it says, what's the connection to the mabul? So Rashi quotes, it says, ki hishchit kol basar. The reason the mabul happened was because hishchit kol basar. How did they learn hishchit kol basar? And we usually understand basar to mean all people, but no, what he means is from their flesh, okay, that they were having seminal emissions. And that was their sin, and therefore anyone who does that is causing the mabul to happen in the world. So how could he even question whether that's what was going on? So Amar Abaye, Asa'ua kibul leshet. Now we said he's like when a fleet of soldiers come into the city. Okay, what is the connection to this? Well, we'll see. Ditnan. It says in the following Mishnah, Boleshet shenechnesa la'ir b'shat shalom. Okay, there's going to be a difference between, okay, let me give you background. We're talking about laws of Yem Nesach. So when you have wine that a non-Jew came in contact with your wine, so this is always an issue. You can't use that wine because maybe the non-Jew offered it up to his gods. So now, what if a fleet of soldiers come into the city and they come through the houses and we don't know, did they touch the wine or did they not touch the wine? So we're now going to distinguish between Shat Shalom, if it's time of peace, or a time of war. Okay, and you'll see why in a minute. So if it's a time of peace, so any chaviyot ptuchot or asurot, stumot, mutarot. If you walk into, if you look at your house after they came rampaging through your house, and you see that you have these open barrels, then you have to say, they're all gone. But if they were sealed, then they're mutarot. Bishat milchama, but if it's a time of war, interestingly, elu ve'elu mutarot. Everything is permitted. Why is everything permitted? Lefi she'ein pnai lenasech. They're too busy with time of war to start offering up your wine to their gods. So therefore, why is that? Alma kevan de bi'ite lo menasche. Since they're all worried about war and they're in fear and they're very busy and focused on that, therefore, they're not going to have time to start offering up your wine to their gods. What does that have to do with our issue? Well, hachanami kevan de ba'i lo ate lihirhore. we're assuming that since Rabbi Abahu was scared when he went into the river, we're going to have to see what exactly he was scared, but since he was scared while he went into the river, he therefore, even if he touched himself, he wouldn't have any bad thoughts that would lead to seminal emissions. So what's his fear when he's going to bathe in the river? Biatuta de Nahara. He's scared of the river. In other words, maybe he'll drown. So he's worried about drowning. Imagine, right? We don't really think about this when we take showers, but they went into the river, theoretically, right? If there was a current in the river, he could have been nervous. Maybe he didn't know how to swim. Probably was less common. So basically, or I don't know if it was less common. I mean, it does come up in the Gemara that you have to teach your kid how to swim. But anyway, because of that, he was obviously scared. And therefore, he was, one could also say that maybe he was a little distracted because he was going to bathe naked in the river, and that he was very focused on, people not seeing him and having proper laws of tzniut. And maybe because of that, he certainly wasn't thinking about having hirhurim and seminal emissions, and therefore there's no concern. And that's why this is all to explain why Rabbi Zera asked the question in the first place. Okay, why there would be this question about did he touch himself or not? Because isn't it obvious he's not going to touch himself? Oh no, well, maybe he would if there's no concern for hirhur. Now the Gemara says, well, let's go back to Rabbi Abahu himself. Ini, forget about touching himself or not touching himself. Could he even put his hands to cover up his private parts? Why? So, Ini, could that really be true? There's a separate problem. This is very interesting, right? On the one hand, we have the issue of tzniut, and you don't want to be walking around naked. On the other hand, if you cover yourself in that area, right? If you cover yourself up, so now again, we have the issue of you can't touch yourself. But forget that. What about covering yourself where you're not actually touching? Well, could one do that when you're really blocking your Brit Milah? It's almost like you're saying, I don't want anyone to see that I have a Brit Milah, and that is also a problem. So, lo kashya, haki nachit, haki saleh. Okay, there's two actions when you're going into the river and when you're coming out of the river. So when you're going into the river, your back is facing everybody, and therefore no one's going to see. So when you're going down into the river, you're not allowed to cover yourself, and if you do, you're basically saying, oh well, I don't really have a brit. Like I don't want anyone to know I've done a brit milah. When you're coming out of the river and you're facing everybody, well, then you should be covering yourself for tzniut purposes, because then you're facing all the people that are standing on the sides of the river. So now they're going to give some more examples. And this is, again, where they learn everything from example. This just teaches you how they learned things in those days. Kiha de Rava Shache, Rava would bend down. Okay, he didn't cover his area, but he would bend down in order to prevent people from seeing his private parts. Rabbi Zera Zakin. Rabbi Zera would stand upright. And the assumption is that Rava would bend down when he was coming out of the river, and Rabbi Zera would stand up tall when he was going into the river. Rabbanan, Deber Rav Ashi, and the rabbis in the house of Rav Ashi, ki kanafte zakfe, ki kasalke shafe. Again, when they were going into the river, they would stand tall, and when they came out of the river, they would bend down. Okay, so again, there's a conflict of interest here between trying to kind of show off that I'm Jewish, and I have a Brit Milah, and I believe in that, versus trying to keep a level of tzniut. Okay, interesting. So yeah, luckily we get to move on now. Rabbi Zera. So now Rabbi Zera, another story about him. There's another interesting fact about him. He wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael, okay, and he in fact does go to Eretz Yisrael, but before he goes, he tries to avoid Rav Yehuda, because Rav Yehuda didn't want him to go to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, this also came up in a few other places. The most famous sugya of this, we saw this in Brachot. It also comes up in Ketubah. That's the real sugya about can one go to Eretz Yisrael, should one, etc. So, Rabbi Zera kiyava mishtame ita Rabbi Yehuda. He was avoiding Rabbi Yehuda. Why? He wanted to go make aliyah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda held kol ha'olem miBavel le'Eretz Yisrael over ba'aseh. Anyone who makes aliyah from Babel to Eretz Yisrael is going against a mitzvah aseh. Well, it's not exactly a mitzvah aseh, but he's going to quote from from Yirmiyahu. Shneimar, Bavela yuvau v'shama yihiyu. Okay, so if you want to see all these psukim, I brought them on the sheet today. Comes up in Yirmiyahu, Parak Kaf Zayin. So here it says, I'll read some of the psukim starting from Kaf Aleph. Ki kamar Hashem tzvaot Elohei Yisrael al hakelim hanotarim beit Hashem ubeit Melech Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. God says the following about the utensils, all the kelim of the Beit HaMikdash that were taken. Bavela yuvahu b'shama yiyu. They're going to be brought to Bavel and they're going to stay there. Ad yom pokti atem ne'um Hashem. Until the day that I say that you're going back. Okay, so basically what's interesting about this is the pshat of these psukim is that they're talking about the vessels of the temple, not about the people. Okay, that's the first thing to note. And the second thing to note that Tosfot points out, which is kind of obvious, but that Tosfot and Ketubot points this out, that it's talking about Bayit Rishon and not Bayit Sheni. Right? This is after the structure of the first temple, and the rabbis are after the structure of the second temple. So you see here two changes that Rabbi Yehuda makes. Rabbi Yehuda says not only that was first temple, we're going to apply this to second temple. Also, that was the vessels, and we're going to apply this to people. And basically, Rabbi Yehuda believed you cannot go back to Israel until there's a divine decree telling you go return to Israel. Okay, which is kind of complicated in their day because there was no more prophecy anyway, right? It's quite complicated that Rabbi Yehuda said this, and therefore Rabbi Zera was trying to avoid Rabbi Yehuda because he knew that, I assume it was public knowledge that Rabbi Zera was planning to go, and he didn't want to go near Rabbi Yehuda, was going to criticize him for going. However, again, we have this conflict of interest. He didn't really want to keep away from Rabbi Yehuda because he was his rabbi, and he wanted to learn from him before he went. So in the end, he says, Amar Ezel ve'eshma minei milta. I'm going to go and learn something from him. The Asik, right? I'm good, and then I'll go. Then I'll go up to Eretz Yisrael. Before I go, I want to part with my rabbi. So where did he find him when he said, I'm going to go see him? Well, he was in the Beit HaMerchatz, in the bathhouse. What was he saying to his shamash, the person serving him? He said, Haviu li neter, which is cleaning material. Haviu li maslek, bring me a comb. Pitchu pumayfu v'afiku havla, open your mouths. I guess he said to the people around him, open your mouths and let the steam come in. V'ashke maya de bebane, and drink the water from the bathhouse, the heated water. So what's Rabbi Zera's reaction to this, right? You expect he's coming to hear some Divrei Torah. He ends up in the bathhouse, and this is what he hears, and he'll think, oh, this is what I came for. But instead, what does he say? Wow, Diana, right? And it's this, just for this, it's great that I came. I'm so happy that I heard this. Okay, now this again is very interesting. Why is this, right? What's so amazing about what Rabbi Yehuda said? So here the Gemara is going to say, they're actually going to raise it as a question. We understand some of this, but some of this we don't really get. That part, okay, I understand what did he learn from there? Kamash Malan, he learned actually something halachic from here. What did he learn? We learned this the other day, that things that, right, if you're talking about mundane things, you can even say them in the bathhouse in the Hebrew language. And since he heard Rabbi Yehuda speaking in Hebrew, the following things, right? If you notice, by the way, Rabbi Yehuda switches halfway. First he says, Habiu li neter, Habiu masrek, that's Hebrew. Then he switches and he says, Pitchu pumayfu v'afiku havla, va'ashtem maya de bebane. He switches to Aramaic. So the fact that he starts in Hebrew, he learned that, we can learn from there, you can speak in Hebrew if you're talking about mundane things. Pitchu pumayfu v'afiku havla, that we can understand. Now, this isn't a halachic thing, but he learned something. And again, this goes back to what we started with today, where the rabbis learned all sorts of things, sometimes halachic, sometimes non-halachic, from seeing what their rabbis did. So this, Kiddush Shmuel, to Amar Shmuel, as Shmuel says, havla mafik havla, right? It's very good if you bring in the heat, it will help take out the bad stuff in your body, right? This is why people go and steam in the steam room, right? Stuff goes in, and then the bad goes out. Ella, ashtumaya bebane maima al yuta. Why would it be a big deal to drink the waters of the bathhouse? Why is that important? So that's the one they don't understand. So the Gemara answers by bringing a long braita, which has a bunch of different things. That again, the rabbis are kind of recommending things that are really health-related advice. Ditanya, and they're going to couch it in interesting terminology. Okay, you'll see. Achal v'lo shata. If you eat but you don't drink, okay, it's not healthy to eat without drinking. If you eat but don't drink, achilato dam. What you ate is like eating blood. I don't know exactly why they use blood, but maybe to scare people, right? It's like eating blood. V'zeu tchilat cholei me'ayim. And this is what causes stomach problems. That's the beginning of stomach problems if you eat without drinking. Right? People always say it's good to take a walk after eating. If you eat and don't walk at least 4 amot, your food rots in your body. And that causes bad breath. If you need to go to the bathroom, but you eat instead of going to the bathroom, and then basically you're eating while you need to go to the bathroom, that's like a tanur shesiku al gabe ofro. All of a sudden it sounds like what we're learning, right? The tanur and the afer and the ashes. So it's like a tanur that you lit it with, as you had the ashes from the old fire and you lit the fire on top of the old ashes, right? Basically, you're not going to have, it's like eating on when you have to go do something, right? You have to go to the bathroom. It's kind of like heating something up on the old ashes, like almost like you haven't gotten rid of your previous meal. This causes a bad odor. Okay, here's our case. If you bathe in hot water, but you don't drink from the hot water, by the way, this is a good lead-in to the upcoming sugya. It's like an oven that you lit up the fire on the outside of the oven, but not on the inside. Think about it. You wash with hot water, you want to warm your body. Well, you're warming your body on the outside, but if you don't drink the water and the heat doesn't go in your body, then you're basically, it's like an oven that you're heating from the outside, but not from the inside. And that's the reason why you should drink hot water, because you're heating your body from the outside, but inside your body is cooler and you want to get your body temperature, even though it's funny, body temperature is always hot. But anyway, that's what they claim. Therefore, you should heat up your body from the inside also. Maybe this is like a good idea. You take a bath, drink a cup of tea at the same time. I don't know. Here's another good advice from this Braita. If you wash in hot water, right, this is what people do after they steam, they go in a very cold bath. So same thing, if you wash in hot water and don't put yourself in cold water, this also is a lead into the next Mishnah. In 2 Mishnah we're going to get to at the bottom of this page. Okay, it's like when you create a metal implement, first you heat the metals, and then you put it into cold water to finish making the vessel. So it's exactly like that. You basically put yourself in hot, but you didn't do the cold, you didn't finish the process. And the last thing, rachatz v'lo sach, if you wash and don't put oil on after, domeh l'mayim al gabei chavit. It's like pouring water on top of a barrel where it'll go on the sides of the barrel and it won't go into the barrel. Like this is people who have skin issues, right? They say while your skin is wet, put cream on and it'll keep the moisture in your body. So again, to have the moisture really go into your body, you need to put the cream on, otherwise it won't kind of seep into your body. So what do we have here? We have all these suggestions of good advice of things to do and things one can learn from your rabbi. I was thinking of connecting these stories of Rabbi Zera, and he sees Rabbi Avau and he wants to understand what he did. Okay, so first of all, it's interesting just that Rabbi Zera was amazed that he learned this from Rabbi Yehuda and said, wow, great that that's what I learned. Again, I think it's showing anything you can learn from your rabbi, right? That's how they viewed their rabbis, that they were sources of information of everything. If we go back to the first stories about Rabbi Avau and Rabbi Zera seeing what Rabbi Avau did and trying to come to some sort of conclusion about, halachic conclusion about it, I think it's, and the question is, what did he mean when he did that? When he was yaniach yadav, so was he touching himself, was he not? When he was in that bathtub or pool type thing, was he swimming, was he not? I was thinking it's very much similar to what we've been talking about in the parak, about people cooking, and we had the whole thing about shogeg and bezid, and if you left it there accidentally, we're going to penalize you because you might actually do it on purpose and tell people I did it by accident. And it connects back with the Mishnah about the women, what they died in childbirth for, and that there's all these, in this realm of halacha, because there's, let's say, often it was the women in the kitchen who were kind of doing all these actions, and whether it's women or men, whoever it is, there's a capability of someone to, here someone's cooking and they're not the only one eating, there's other people eating. And there's an option here of people doing things that are not seen by the eye, right? And people don't know how to interpret them, what exactly they did, what was their intent. And we're going to get into later today also about davar she'eino mitkaven. You do something, but it wasn't your intent to do that malacha, or you chayav or not. And what's interesting here is, on the one hand, Shabbat's all about the maaseh, right? When we talked about the difference between kodshim and kodshim, it's very important, your kavanah. How much does your kavanah affect things? And here, right, this is almost, there's all these situations where people do things and we're not sure what they did, and that is very important to know what was the intent, what was somebody thinking? What were they doing? And maybe these stories are kind of getting us into the mindset of that's what's important here. It's also important not just what you're doing, but also what you're thinking and what your intent is. And also it's important to know what's going on in someone's mind because or what they were doing, because if you don't know what they're doing, then you can't know whether I can eat this food on Shabbat or not. How did they cook it? In what way did they cook it, right? We go to people's houses, we eat all the time. Do we know exactly how they heated up their food on Shabbat? No, nobody's checking up on them. So there's a certain amount of trust that we need and a certain amount of assuming if somebody's doing something, then they're doing it right. So anyway, and maybe that's the struggle here. How do we know? Do we know? Don't we know? So maybe these stories are coming to shed a little bit of light on the fact that this is an issue with these sugyot. Okay, moving on to the next mission. This mission is going to be very complicated because nobody really knows the reality of what these utensils are that they're talking about. There's a lot of discussion of it both in the Gemara, in the Rishonim, in modern academics, in pictures in the Quran. You can see what exactly this is. There's a range of opinions, but we're going to see two different types of water heating implements and a different halacha for each of them. Moliyah hagaruf, shotin hemenu b'Shabbat. Again, we have this idea of garuf. Garuf means sweeping the coals to the side. Here you see it doesn't help to put the ashes on top in this case, but if you sweep the coals to the side in a moliyah, shotin hemenu b'Shabbat, you can then drink water from there on Shabbat. We'll get to soon what a moliyah is. I'll leave it aside for a minute till we get to the Gemara. Antichi, but this is a different type of water heater. Even if you sweep the coals to the side, you still can't drink from it. So what is this case of a moliyah garuf? So they quote a makor Tanai, Tana mayim mibifnim ugechalim mibachutz. That's why I said before about hisiku mibachutz, below hisiku mibifnim. It's a reference to what we're going to see here. There's water on the inside and coals on the outside. So in the Quran, there's a picture, the Steinsaltz, where there's kind of this, like the way we have a hot water boiler on the side, and next to it is as opposed to ours, which has a heating element underneath, the heating element is next to it, and they would put all the coals next to it, and then the water would heat because it's next to it. Now it's kind of one implement, but next to each other. That's one interpretation. The Aruch, which is the earliest dictionary, actually must have the opposite version because they say the mayim is mibachutz and the gechalim are bifnim. Okay, and somehow there's the opposite order. There's a big debate about what exactly this is. There's different sources that discuss, but anyway, it's some sort of whatever it is. It's clearly less heat than the next thing we're going to see, the antichi, which already in the Gemara there's two different interpretations what it is. Rav Amar Beikire, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar Beidude. So the antichi, is it a Beikire or is it a Beidude? Okay, what is a Beikire? What is a Beidude? So Rashi explains a Beikire is there's basically this empty space in the middle, and there's kind of walls. It looks like a walled city. If you look in the picture in the Steinsaltz, it's like this walls around the inside part. The inside is where the water sits. The outside has these walls, and the walls are thick, and inside the walls are coals. So because it's completely surrounded, as opposed to the other one where it sounded like the coals were on the side and the water was on the side of the coals, here the coals are surrounding the heating element, and because it's the heating element is in these walls, the heat stays in for a long time. That's Beikire. Rav Nachman says Beidude. Okay, so again, there's different interpretations of what this is. Rashi seems to describe like a cauldron in a cauldron. Okay, there's a cauldron at the bottom, almost like a double boiler. So there's a cauldron. In that are the coals, and in that sits another pot. Okay, and in that pot is the water. So the main difference, it seems like, is that here there's much more heat, and maybe the heat is more directly touching the water, and therefore even stoking the coals to the side doesn't help. Okay, now the Gemara is going to say, Tanya, first they're going to say, Manda Amar Beidude, if you say it's Beidude, it's this with the coals, right, the cauldron, one on top of the other, Kol Shekain Beikire. All the more so, the assumption is, okay, I don't know if I would have made this assumption, but the assumption is that if the coals are inside the walls and the walls are surrounding the water, that's much hotter. I guess because it's surrounded on all sides by the heating element, that's much hotter. And therefore, if you're going to say Beidude, then all the more so you would say a Beikire can't be used. The Manda Amar Beikire, if you say it's the Beikire type, then Aval Beidude lo. You would say that the Beidude is more like the moliyah, and that would actually be allowed if you stoke the coals to the side of the cauldron one. Tanya Kavatei de Rav Nachman. Now we're going to bring a bride to the proof of Nachman. Antichi afa pisha grufa uktuma ein shotine menu mipnei shenechushata mechamamta. Okay, so Rav Nachman said it was Beidu Day, this cauldron, one on top of the other. And now they say, even though it's grufa uktuma, you can't drink from it according to the source because nechushata mechamamtan. And nechushata is either it's metal, the metal of it, but that doesn't really make so much sense if that's proving Rav Nachman. But what they say is nechushata, and Rashi quotes a pasuk from Yechezkel, after the pasukim that we read in the Haggadah about, and I saw her wallowing in her blood, right? So those pasukim, near those pasukim, there's this pasuk about yan hishapech nechushatech, which means your walls came down, and therefore they say it seems to imply that it's the one where the heating element is right. He says it proves dafka the Beidu Day, that it's the heating element is underneath because the nechushata is like the lip at the bottom or something. Anyway, to me it sounds like it actually could prove both, but anyway, that's what the Gemara says. This supports Rav Nachman. It's very hard to understand these without really understanding the whole reality of what these kelim look like. And if you look at Mishnah Eretz Yisrael, where he tries to also kind of get to what the reality is, he quotes a lot of different sources, like sources in the Midrash that mention it. One source, it's actually just interesting, the Tanchuma, it says, Hamolir Hazer, we're talking about the Moliav, in Bikesh Adam lahotzi mimenu chamin, motzi, tzonei motzi. It sounded like it had two parts. One had cold water, one had hot water. Again, it's very hard to, even if you collect all the different sources, and even in Mishnah certainly tries to find all the old sources which talk about these things, still very complicated to figure out what the reality is. Okay, moving on to the next Mishnah. Another problematic Mishnah to understand. Hamecham, but this for different reasons. Hamecham shepinahu. Okay, now, what does it mean, pinahu? So it seems that the pshat of pinahu means if you have a mecham full of hot water on Shabbat, you dump all the hot water, and now what do you want to do? Lo yitem letochot soneim b'shvil sheyichamu. You can't put cold water in it in order to heat them up. Okay, so basically you take this hot kli. This is like kli rishon, right? It's a kli rishon that was on the fire. Okay, just to point out, I forgot to mention yesterday. It's a very famous Tosfot on yesterday's stuff about kli sheni and Yomi vashel. What's the difference between a kli rishon and a kli sheni? And basically, Tosfot asked the obvious question, which is, if a kli rishon gets up to, if a kli rishon, what's the difference between a kli rishon and a kli sheni if the amount of heat in it is the same? Because basically, you could take hot water from a kli rishon, put in a kli sheni, and it's the same temperature, even if it drops a little bit. He basically says if it's yad soledibo, it should be a problem, right? No matter, it should be based on temperature and not how many times you remove the kli, right? Every time you make tea, you probably wonder, right? What is this really changing anything? So Tosfot has a famous answer where he says it has to do with the defanot of the kli. That because it was on the heat, or because it was closer to the heat, right? The first kli, the heat stays in the sides of the kli. And because of that, it heats the next thing much more. So that would be a good example here of this mechan. You dump all the water, but the walls of this kli are still very, very hot, and therefore they could cook the water, okay? You could do a scientific experiment. There's also, depending on how you understand Tosfot, what if you have a thermos, which is supposed to keep the heat in? So would you say a thermos then, even in a kli sheni or shlishi, one of those kelim that really attracts the heat to it, would that be an issue? If your Hebrew's good, you can go listen on the site. It'll be up later today. The next parak of Gefet from the Rashi Yeshiva of Drisha. So El Shimoni talks specifically about this Tosfot, trying to understand it better, and possible nafkaminas between different understandings of it. Okay, it's a short 10-minute video. So now, let's assume right now, although we're going to raise a question about this, that we're talking about you dumped all the water, and then you can't put cold water in order to heat it up. But what can you do? And this is going to sound very strange because it sounds like exactly what it said you can't do. But you could put in there, or even if it wasn't a mecham, but it was a hot cup, in order to cool off the water. Now, where do you draw the line between I'm putting it in to heat up my water, or I'm putting it in, not to cool off, to warm up, right? Just to take the chill out of the water, right? Where's that line? Again, this goes back to what I said earlier about your intent is very important, right? And how do we know, were you intending just, right? Think about it, if you put something on the plata, we don't generally put cold items on the plata on Shabbat morning. But let's say you weren't really planning to heat it up. You just want to get the chill out. But then, you could forget to take it off at that point, right? Where do you draw the line between what's considered heating up and what's considered just taking the chill out? So my Kamar. So the Gemara immediately says, what is this Mishnah talking about? We're going to have two different interpretations. Amar of Ada bar Matna, Hachi Kamar. This is what it means. Hamecham shepina mimenu mayim chamim. You have a mecham where, again, this is how we explained it. You dump all the hot water. Lo yitain letocho, and here's letocha. Now we're going to see the difference. Mayim mu'atim. If you put a small amount of water, what will happen to that water? It will heat up. Kedesh yechamu. Aval noten letocho mayim rubin kedei lafshiran. But if you dump a huge amount of water into this empty, hot pot that was on the fire before but isn't anymore, well, what will happen? It's not going to heat up, right? So if you put a ton of water, then it's okay. Obviously, you have to figure out where exactly the line is between a little and a lot, but fine, assuming you can figure that out. If you put a little bit that would heat up, it's a problem. If you put a lot, it would be fine. Now the Gemara says, but wait, halo mitzaref. This is what we talked about just before, that when you pour cold water into something that just had hot water in it, what will happen? It will help find what we call, according to Rashi, it's what we call gemar melacha, it's makebe patish, the final blow to building this kli. It's interesting, you would have thought the kli was already created, but I think their kelim were different than ours, where the metal, while they had the hot water in it, would kind of melt a little bit and would soften, not melt exactly, but soften. So anytime you put cold water into this kli, it's going to basically finish up the kli, it will harden it. So how can you do that if it's actually causing it to harden? Now the question is, Rashi says very simply, it's what we call makebe patish. It's finishing up the kli, and that's the malacha. Other people say, Rabbeinu Hanan in the Sugya Yoma says, no, the problem with serif is mechabe. You're putting out, you're extinguishing. It comes from extinguishing. Anyway, there's a debate. The Ravid and some others say, actually, it's not even asur midoraita. It's not, you're not really doing a malacha. It's derabana. It's like doing a malacha. It's not exactly. So anyway, how could you possibly do that? So the answer, according to Ada bar Ava, it's Rabbi Shimon. Our Mishnah follows Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Ta'amar davar she'ein mitkaven mutar. Shimon holds, we've seen this before, we're going to see it a number of times more. If you do an act, you do a malacha, but that wasn't your intent. When you poured that cold water in, you were trying just to get the chill out. You weren't trying to finish off the kli, or however you say, you weren't trying to say with kli. So it's mutal. Now, a lot of Rishonim raise a question on this because even Rabbi Shimon, who holds davar she'eino mitkaven mutal, holds that if it's psik resha, what's psik resha? It'll definitely happen. Then he doesn't allow it. So wouldn't this be psik resha? When you pour the cold water in, even if you're not intending for it to do tzevuf kli, it's going to be. So some people suggest that maybe it's not for sure going to do that. Maybe the kli, as I suggested earlier, was already in its perfect condition, and by pouring the cold water in, it's not changing the kli at all. Maybe when it was heated up, it never got to a high enough heat that when you pour the cold water, in order for tzeruf to work, it has to be very, very hot before. Maybe it never got up to that level of heat, so maybe that's why. In any case, they try to raise questions about this because it does seem like it's a psik resha, and Rabbi Shimon would say psik resha is actually forbidden. So we're going to assume this follows Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Davar she'eino mitkaven mutar. Matkifla Abaye. Abaye says, wait a minute. Why did you think that pinahu means that you took all the water out? It doesn't say you took all the water out. It says mecham shepinahu katane, which sounds like you took the mecham off of the fire. Imagine there's a fire under the hot water boiler. You take the hot water boiler off. Maybe that's what we're talking about. And then you're putting in cold water into the hot water. So that's how he explains the case. Amar Abaye hachi kamar mecham shepinahu v'yesh bo mayim chamim. If you took the hot water, took it off the heating element, this would be classic kli rishon that was on the fire, and now you took it off the fire. Lo yitain letocho mayim muatim b'shvil sheyichamu. You can't put, again, he's going to say it again, it's the difference between a small amount of water, a large amount of water. So you can't put a small amount of water in order to heat it up. Aval noten letocho mayim merubim kedei lahafshiran. But you could put a lot of water in order to cool them off, because once you put a ton of water into a kli rishon, all at once, then we'll say, then that water will just be to take the chill out, and that's allowed. But then what's inferred from there? If that's the case of the Mishnah, if you were to, and it's not talking about the one you took the hot water out, you would assume, according to Abaye, mecham shepina mimenu mayim lo yitain letocho mayim kol ikal. If you took the water out of the mecham and now you want to put cold water in, you can't put any cold water in because why? Mipnei shemitzaref, because that's going to cause this tziruf kli. The Rabbi Yehuda, and then we'd have to say that our Mishnah didn't bring that case according to Abaye, because the Mishnah actually held the opposite, like Rabbi Yehuda, who says davar she'eino mitkaven asur. Rabbi Yehuda holds davar she'eino mitkaven is forbidden, and that's why if you actually took the water out, that wouldn't be allowed, because even though you're not intending to do tziruf kli, it's happening anyway. Okay, just as an aside, I heard a great explanation in Daf Mishalanu, which is the weekly vlog of Hamutal and Shira, which is on the Hadran site in Hebrew. They have a great discussion about this machlok of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, both about davar she'eino mitkaven, malach she'eino tzricha legufa, and they connect it, which I never heard. It was a great chidush. They connect it to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, and the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because Rabbi Shimon is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and in the whole story, I always wondered because Rabbi Shimon comes out much more mekel in all these issues. He says everything is even mutar. He says malach she'eino tzricha legufa is patur. And I always felt like Rabbi Shimon is always this kind of and he has much more strict opinions in general. But they connected it so well. In the beginning of that story, if you remember, how does it start? It starts with the Rabbi Yehuda says the Romans created these bartemer chatzaot and they created all these things and look how great. And Rabbi Shimon says, what are you talking about? They did it all because, the prostitutes and just for their own sake. So if you look at their machloket, it's the exact same thing. It's all about, is your intent what matters or what you're doing matters? As Rabbi Yehuda said, I don't care what their intent was. Look what they did. They did great things for us. And Rabbi Shimon says, I don't care what they did. It's all about their intent. All they were doing it was for their own selfish purposes and for bad reasons, for prostitution and all that. So Rabbi Shimon is very consistent with his approach that it's what's inside that matters. And in this case, his mekel, because your intent wasn't to do the malacha. So because you didn't have intent, well then you're not actually doing anything wrong. So it's very interesting to connect those. And anyway, you can listen to their talk about it. It's very interesting. And it's good background to all these machlokot that we're going to see that come up all the time, this Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so now we have two approaches, as we said. One is mecham shepinau, is you took all the water out, and then it's Rabbi Shimon, where it's davar she'eino mitkaven, we're not worried about the tzeruf, versus the second approach, Abaye, which is you move the mecham off the hot water, right, off the heating element, and then you wanted to put the cold water inside, and then it's a matter of just cooking, right? And either which way, the issue is cooking, and then the question, but there we're not worried about tzeruf because there is no tzeruf that's going to happen, and that's because he holds like Rabbi Yehuda that davar she'eino mitkaven would be usher, and therefore for sure that's not what we're talking about. Now we're going to have a machlok of Rav and Shmuel, which seems to line up. Okay, it's actually interesting. I haven't figured out why. Usually the sugyot go in order chronologically, and Rav and Shmuel usually are the first ones. I don't know why they come later in the sugya, why they're not mentioned in the beginning here, but they also have a machlok about this Mishnah, which seems to line up with the two approaches of Rav Bar and Abaye. Amar Rav, lo shanu ela lahafshir, aval litzaref asur. Okay, you can only do it if you're cooling the water and not if you're going to have tzeruf. That sounds like the second opinion, like Abaye. Ushmuel amar afilu litzaref nami mutar. Even if you're doing it, now here it's a little bit different. It says even if you're doing it to be mitzaref the kli, you're still allowed to put the cold water. So the Gemara jumps on Shmuel and says, what do you mean? Litzaref lechatchila mishari. Even Rabbi Shimon doesn't allow you to do tzeruf intentionally, and it sounds like you're intending to pour the cold water in order to do tzeruf. That no one ever said. So therefore, they change a little bit. They say, no. So you misunderstood. Ela itmar hachitmar. This is what they meant to say. Amarav lo shanu ela shi'or lahafshil aval shi'or litzaref asur. Now we're going to learn that in order to do tzeruf, you actually have to have a large enough shi'or of water. You have to fill it. Some people say entirely to even get to the top of the kli. Some people say you just need a lot of water. So Rav's going to say this is as long as you put, in other words, it all matters how much water. If you put a lot of cold water, but not enough that it's going to do tzeruf kli, then it's allowed. But if you put a shi'ur that will actually be mitzaref the kli, it's usher. That matches Rabbi Yehuda, because davar she'eino mitkaven asur. Ushmuel amar, and now we go back and we change Shmuel basically. When Shmuel said you can do it litzaref, he didn't mean with the intent litzaref, he meant the amount of water litzaref, meaning you can pour enough cold water in, even if it fills it up, and it's going to cause tzeruf, afilu shi'ur litzaref mutar. Because he holds the davar she'eino mitkaven. He holds like Rabbi Shimon, the davar she'eino mitkaven is mutar. Okay, so again, we have Rav and Shmuel line up with Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara is going to question tomorrow, well, I'm with this today, but I'll just kind of mention, does Shmuel really hold like Rabbi Shimon? Because we're now going to say that Shmuel in a different place doesn't hold like Rabbi Shimon. So how are we going to work that out with our case? Okay, that's it for today.